ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Pontiac Enchanté. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue à Pontiac Enchanté. Je m'appelle Carson Becke et je suis le directeur artistique de cette série de concerts. Ce soir, c'est le 5e concert dans notre série de concerts 2021 et 2022. Et nous sommes très heureux d'être ici sur ligne avec vous ce soir. Je vais parler la plupart aujourd'hui en anglais, mais bienvenue à tous nos invités francophones et bon concert. My name is Carson Becke. I am the artistic director of this concert series, and tonight is the 5th concert of our 2021-2022 concert series. We're very excited to be finally returning to a kind of hybrid format tonight. We have viewers joining us both online, like you, and viewers here in the hall with us. For this concert, for reasons that I'll explain in a minute, we decided to take a slightly different approach. So we've actually pre-recorded this live stream performance, but broadcast it simultaneously with the live performance. There are just certain things about it that we thought would work better in this way, and so it's a bit of an experiment. So if you have any feedback for us, please let us know afterwards by email. We'd be very interested to see if this experience is any different for you than a purely live stream live experience might have been. So in a normal situation, in normal times, which these certainly aren't for lots of reasons, our sponsors are extremely important, but especially through this pandemic, and as we now hopefully come out of the pandemic, our sponsors have been more important than ever for us. So I would just like to say a personal thank you to each and every one of them, starting with Marg Campbell, who is joining us tonight online, Dasha Schenkman, who I believe will also be with us online, Mark Rondell of the RBC Rondell Wealth Management Group. Thank you to them for their support for the entire duration of our existence as a concert series. Norton Rose Fulbright, Hello Ventures, and finally Bill Fenton in memory of Ruth Mary Harris. Thank you to all of you for your support of this series and your continued support as we go into the hopefully pandemic-free future. The crew assisting me in tonight's concert is wonderful. First of all, making sure that you can hear all of our musicians this evening is Ross Murray, working his magic with microphones and sound engineering. Ross has been working with us since we started live streaming concerts in September of 2020, and we would not be able to do what we do now without him. So a huge thank you to Ross for being here tonight and for all of his support through the past few months. And secondly, to Tate Becke, who is my co-director. You won't be seeing him tonight because he's making sure that you can see the musicians. Tate is the production manager, he's manning the cameras, he's making sure that everything runs smoothly with the live stream. So a big thank you to Tate for all that he does for this series as well. If you're watching this concert for the first time, or watching one of our concerts for the first time, well, first of all, welcome, and we hope you'll be here for many more. The best way to find out about what we have coming up and what's happening with Pontiac Enchanté is to join our emailing list. You can do that by pressing the little green button in the right-hand top corner of your screen. It says Join Email List. Leave us your email. We won't spam you nonstop. Just an email every month to tell you what's going on, what's coming up next. And importantly, right now, as we're in slightly unpredictable times, we tell you with those emails what's going to be happening with the next concert, whether we'll be virtually only or in person and virtual. So it's very important to follow us there to figure out what's coming up next. We also have a Facebook account, so you can follow us on Facebook, where we post information about upcoming concerts, and Instagram, where we post pictures, information, and just things around the running of the concert series. So that's a few ways that you can stay in touch with us. So those of you viewing tonight online are watching on our virtual concert hall platform. Just a few things that you can do to make your concert experience, your concert viewing experience more enjoyable. On the left-hand side of your screen, there's a button saying Download Concert Program. If you click on that, a new window will open beside the concert hall viewer where you can follow along the concert program. So for tonight, it's a little bit different because the concert is kind of through composed. We don't really take breaks between numbers. It's just one thing. But there are art songs interspersed into the main dialogue. So you can follow along which art songs you're listening to, and that's also a good way of keeping track of where we are in the program. There is going to be a small intermission at the end of part 1, so with the last song by Richard Strauss. So that's kind of a good marker for you to keep track of. But also, if you're interested in the composers and the poets that we're featuring alongside Richard Strauss and Alfred Lord Tennyson, that program is a very good way for you to access that information. And also, if you click on the names of the artists on the second page of the program, you can find out more about who's performing for you tonight. On the right-hand side of the media viewer is the donation button. So you're viewing this concert for free, but we would ask that you donate any amount that feels right to you through that donation portal. Donations are very important for us, seeing as we're still not at full in-person capacity. So whatever you're able to donate will go a long way in making sure that we can continue to put on these concerts for you. So thank you very much in advance for your donations. Finally, make sure that if you'd like to be viewing on full screen for a more immersive experience, I guess, click on the little square in the bottom right-hand corner of the media viewer. That will send the picture to full screen, and you can also control the volume down there as well. There's a little slider to make sure that you're hearing us just as loudly as you would like. So the artists that I'm joined by this evening are actor Eleanor Crowder and soprano Meghan Lindsay. I am so grateful to the two of them for taking on this project. Performing Richard Strauss and Tennyson's Enoch Arden has been something that I've wanted to do for years. My friends probably are glad that I'm doing this, mainly because it means that I won't be talking to them about the possibility of this concert anymore. And it was no small feat for both Meghan and Eleanor to jump on board with this, because it's not a very straightforward piece. It requires a lot of creative input from the performers to make it work. So I'm just so appreciative to the two of them for doing this with me. The work that you're going to hear tonight, Enoch Arden composed, well, incidental music composed by Richard Strauss, along with the narrative poetry of Alfred Lord Tennyson, is a somewhat unusual piece and not often very played. This genre of music is not performed often, so I wanted to give it a brief introduction just so that you know kind of what you're in for. So this is a melodrama, not in the sense of the modern melodrama, which is sort of an overly emotional performance that, you know, characters do things that are totally unbelievable, their levels of engagement are not realistic, it's sort of a heightened emotional experience. This is not that kind of melodrama. This is a melodrama in the 19th century meaning of the word, which is very simply a theatrical performance with musical accompaniment. I like to think about this as kind of pre-film entertainment. So obviously the precursor to film is opera and kind of genres of opera and musical theater that existed before the 20th century. But the melodrama was something that you could do in a much smaller, more intimate space, kind of like we're doing now. Whereas for an opera, you would need a large cast. It's very expensive. You need an orchestra, usually very large audiences. It's a very big production. A melodrama was a very small production, meaning that it could happen in somebody's living room. The reciter could be, you know, a particularly talented uncle in the family, and the pianist could be a particularly talented other uncle. And it was just a way for people to enjoy their probably very long winter evenings before we had television, before we had Netflix. So these were very popular, and composers through the 19th century wrote a lot of them. Franz Liszt wrote lots of melodramas, Robert Schumann wrote a bunch of them, but as they got replaced by other forms of domestic entertainment, they sort of dwindled, and they weren't particularly profitable to write anymore, and through the 20th century they've kind of slipped completely into obscurity. This melodrama, I think, is an exceptional piece, first of all because of its length. It's a full evening performance. It's not just a few minutes, it really is a full evening. And also because of the quality of the music. Richard Strauss, many of you might know, he was an excellent composer of operas and symphonies, but he was also a very good pianist and wrote this for himself to perform with Ernst von Possart, who was the director of the Munich Court Theater. They toured around Germany playing this, and when he toured in North America, he played this with lots of actors and singers in this country. So I'm excited to be bringing it to you because these performances don't happen very often anymore. It's a bit of an anachronistic thing to be doing today in the 21st century. There's something I'd like you to listen out for early on in the piece, just because it gives you a key to what's happening throughout the rest of the piece. There's a kind of piano introduction which sounds a lot like waves in the ocean, and there's a good reason for that you will understand soon into the story. Shortly after that, there's a section where Eleanor will tell you about the main characters of the story, Enoch Arden, Philip, and Annie. And as you hear each of the characters' names, listen closely to what the piano does, because there's themes that accompany each of those characters. And that's kind of the moment when Strauss introduces the theme for each character. And those are the three themes that get used throughout the piece to kind of signal to you when certain characters are maybe coming into the action, when, you know, maybe somebody's thinking of a character who's not present. That's kind of how he uses the music to show you what's happening in the story, or to elaborate on what's happening in the story. So I hope you'll enjoy this. I'm very excited to be doing this evening. And please sit back with your glass of wine in your couch to listen to Alfred Lord Tennyson's Enoch Arden with music by Richard Strauss. Thank you very much.
Long lines of cliff breaking have left a chasm, and in the chasm are foam and yellow sands. Beyond, red roofs about a narrow wharf in cluster, then a mouldered church, and higher a long street climbs to one tall towered mill. And high in heaven behind it, a grey down with Danish barrows, and a hazelwood by autumn nutters haunted flourishes green in a cup-like hollow of the down. Here on this beach, 200 years ago, 3 children of 3 houses. Annie Lee, the prettiest little damsel of the port. And Philip Ray, the miller's only son. And Enoch Arden, a rough sailor's lad, made orphan by a winter shipwreck. They played among the waste and lumber of the shore. Hard coils of cordage, swarthy fishing nets, anchors of rusty fluke, and boats updrawn, and built their castles of dissolving sand to watch them overflowed, or following up and flying, the white breaker daily left the little footprint, daily washed away. A narrow cave ran in beneath the cliff. In this, the children played at keeping house. Enoch was host one day, Philip the next, while Annie still was mistress. But at times, Enoch would hold possession for a week. "This is my house, and this my little wife." "Mine too," said Philip, turn and turn about. When if they quarrelled, Enoch's stronger maid was master. Then would Philip, his blue eyes all flooded with the helpless wrath of tears, shriek out, "I hate you, Enoch!" And at this the little wife would weep for company and pray them not to quarrel for her sake, and say she would be little wife to both. When the dawn of rosy childhood passed, and the new warmth of life's ascending sun was felt by either. Either fixed his heart on that one girl. And Enoch spoke his love, but Philip loved in silence. And the girl seemed kinder unto Philip than to him. But she loved Enoch, though she knew it not, and would have asked deny it. Enoch set a purpose evermore before his eyes, to hoard all savings to the uttermost, to purchase his own boat, and make a home for Annie. And so prospered that at last a luckier or a bolder fisherman, a carefuller in peril, did not breathe for leagues along that breaker-beaten coast than Enoch. Likewise had he served a year on board a merchantman, and made himself full sailor, and he thrice had plucked a life from the dread sweep of the downstreaming seas, and all men looked upon him favourably. And ere he touched his 21st May, he purchased his own boat and made a home for Annie, neat and nest-like, halfway up the narrow street that clambered toward the mill. Then, on a golden autumn eventide, the younger people making holiday with bag and sack and basket, great and small, went nutting to the hazels. Philip stayed, his father lying sick and needing him, an hour behind. But as he climbed the hill, just where the prone edge of the wood began to feather toward the hollow, saw the pair, Enoch and Annie, sitting hand in hand, his large grey eyes and weather-beaten face all kindled by a still and sacred fire that burned as on an altar. Philip looked, and in their eyes and faces read his doom. Then, as their faces drew together, groaned and slipped aside, and like a wounded life crept down into the hollows of the wood. There, while the rest loud in merrymaking, had his dark hour unseen. And rose and passed, bearing a lifelong hunger in his heart. filled by the river, my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she laid her snow-white hand. She bade me take life easy as the grass grows on the earth. But I, being young and foolish, and now am full of tears. So these were wed, and merrily rang the bells, and merrily rang the years, 7 happy years. 7 happy years of health and competence and mutual love and honorable toil. With children, first a daughter. In him woke with his first babe's first cry the noble wish to save all earnings to the uttermost, and give his child a better bringing up than his had been, or hers. A wish renewed when 2 years after came a boy to be the rosy idol of her solitudes, while Enoch was abroad on wrathful seas, or often journeying landward. For in truth, Enoch's white horse, and Enoch's ocean spoil, and his face, rough reddened with 1,000 winter gales, not only to the market cross were known, but in the leafy lanes behind the down, far as the peacock yew tree of the lonely hall. Then came a change, as all things human change. 10 miles to northward of the narrow port opened a larger haven. Thither used Enoch at times to go by land or sea. And once when there, and clambering on a mast in harbour, by mischance he slipped and fell. A limb was broken when they lifted him, and while he lay recovering there, his wife bore him another son, a sickly one. Another hand crept too across his trade, taking her bread and theirs. And on him fell, although a grave and staid God-fearing man, yet lying thus inactive, doubt and gloom. He seemed as in a nightmare to see his children leading ever more low, miserable lives of hand to mouth, and her he loved, a beggar. Then he prayed, "Save them from this, whatever comes to me." And while he prayed, the master of that ship Enoch had served in, hearing his mischance, came, for he knew the man and valued him, reporting of his vessel China-bound and wanting yet a boatswain. Would he go? There yet were many weeks before she sail from this port. Would Enoch have the place? And Enoch all at once assented to it, rejoicing at that answer to his prayer. So now that the shadow of mischance appeared no graver than as when some little cloud cuts off the sun. Yet the wife, when he was gone, the children, what to do? Then Enoch lay long pondering on his plans to sell the boat. Yet he loved her well. How many a rough sea had he weathered in her? He knew her as a horseman knows his horse, and yet to sell her? Then, with what she brought, buy goods and stores, set Annie forth in trade with all that seamen needed or their wives, so she might keep the house while he was gone. Should he not trade himself out yonder? Go this voyage more than once. At last, returning rich, become the master of a larger craft, with fuller profits lead an easier life. Have all his pretty young ones educated, and pass his days in peace among his own. Thus Enoch in his heart determined all. Then moving homeward came on Annie, pale, nursing the sickly babe, her latest born. Forward she started with a happy cry and laid the feeble infant in his arms, whom Enoch took and handled all his limbs, appraised his weight and fondled father-like, but had no heart to break his purpose to Annie till the morrow, when he spoke. Then first, since Enoch's golden ring had girt her finger, Annie fought against his will. Not with brawling opposition she, but many a tear, many a sad kiss by day and night renewed, sure that all evil would come out of it, besought him supplicating, if he cared for her or his dear children, not to go.
Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, inwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and dim and the dark cloths of night and the light and the half light, I would spread my cloth under your feet, but have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams.
He not for his own self-caring, but her and her children. Let her plead in vain. So grieving held his will and bore it through. For Enoch parted with his old sea friend, bought Annie goods and stores, and set his hand to fit their little streetward sitting room with shelf and corner. So all day long till Enoch's last at home, hammer and axe, auger and saw, while Annie seemed to hear her own death scaffold raising, shrilled and rang till this was ended, and his careful hand paused. And he who needs would work for Annie to the last, ascending tired, heavily slept till morn. And Enoch faced this morning of farewell brightly and boldly. All his Annie's fears, save as his Annie's, were a laughter to him. Yet Enoch, as a brave, God-fearing man, bowed himself down and prayed for a blessing on his wife and babes, whatever came to him. And then he said, Annie, this voyage, by the grace of God, will bring fair weather yet to all of us. Keep a clean hearth and a clear fire for me, for I'll be back, my girl, before you know it. Then lightly rocking baby's cradle. And he, this puny little one, nay, for I love him all the better for it, God bless him, he shall sit upon my knees, and I will tell him tales of foreign parts and make him merry when I come home again. Come, Annie, come, cheer up before I go. At length she spoke. Enoch, you are wise, and yet for all your wisdom, well I know that I shall look upon your face no more. Well then, said Enoch, I shall look on yours. Annie, the ship I sail in passes here, he named the day. Get you a seaman's glass, spy out my face and laugh at your fears. But when the last of those last moments came, Annie, my girl, cheer up, be comforted. Look to the babes until I come again, keep everything ship-shape, for I must go. And fear no more for me. Or if you fear, cast all your cares on God. That anchor holds. The sea is his. The sea is his. He made it. Enoch rose, cast his strong arms about his drooping wife, and kissed his wonder-stricken little ones. But for the third sickly one who slept after a night of feverish wakefulness. When Annie would have raised him, Enoch said, Wake him not, let him sleep. How should this child remember this? And kissed him in his cot. But Annie from her baby's forehead clipped a tiny curl and gave it. This he kept through all his future, but now hastily caught his bundle, waved his hand, and went away. When the day that Enoch mentioned came, borrowed a glass, but all in vain. Perhaps she could not fix the glass to suit her eye. Perhaps her eye was dim, hand tremulous. She saw him not, and while he stood on deck waving, the moment and the vessel passed. Even to the last dip of the vanishing sail, she watched it. And departed, weeping for him. Then, though she mourned his absence as his grave, set her sad will no less to chime with his, but throve not in her trade, not being bred to barter, nor compensating the want by shrewdness, neither capable of lies, nor asking overmuch and taking less, and still foreboding. What would Enoch say? For more than once, in days of difficulty and pressure, had she sold her wares for less than what she gave in buying. She failed and saddened, knowing it, and thus expectant of that news that never came, gained for her own a scanty sustenance, and lived a life of silent melancholy. Now the third child was sickly born and grew yet sicklier, though the mother cared for it with all a mother's care. Nevertheless, whether her business often called her from it, or through the want of what it needed most, or means to pay the voice who best could tell what most it needed, howsoe'er it was, after a lingering, ere she was aware, like the caged bird escaping suddenly, the little innocent soul flitted away. In that same week when Annie buried it, Philip's true heart, which hungered for her peace, since Enoch left he had not looked upon her, smote him, as having kept aloof so long. Surely, said Philip, I may see her now, may be some little comfort. Therefore went, passed through the solitary room in front, paused a moment at an inner door, struck it thrice, and no one opening, went in. But Annie, seated with her grief, fresh from the burial of her little one, cared not to look on any human face, turned her own towards the wall and wept. Then Philip, standing up, said falteringly, Annie, I came to ask a favor of you. He spoke. Her moaned reply, favor, from one so sad and so forlorn as I am, half abashed him. Yet unasked, he set himself beside her, saying to her, I came to speak to you of what he wished, Enoch, your husband. I have ever said you chose the best among us, a strong man, for where he fixed his heart, he set his hand to do the thing he willed and bore it through. And wherefore did he go this weary way and leave you lonely? Not to see the world, for pleasure, nay, but for the wherewithal to give his babes a better bringing up than his had been or yours. That was his wish. And if he come again, vexed will he be to find the precious morning hours were lost. And it would vex him even in his grave, if he could know his babes were running wild like colts about the waste. So Annie, now, have we not known each other all our lives? I do beseech you, by the love you bear him and his children, not to say me nay. For if you will, when Enoch comes again, why then he shall repay me, if you will, Annie, for I am rich and well-to-do. Now let me put the boy and girl to school. This is the favor I came to ask. Then Annie, I cannot look you in the face. I seem so foolish and so broken down. When you came in, my sorrow broke me down. Now I think your kindness breaks me down. But Enoch lives. That is borne in on me. He will repay you. Money can be repaid, not kindness such as yours. And Philip asked, Then you will let me, Annie? She turned. She rose, calling down a blessing on his head, caught at his hand, and wrung it passionately. Then Philip put the boy and girl to school and bought them needful books, and every way, like one who does his duty by his own, made himself theirs. And though for Annie's sake, fearing the gossip of the port, he oft denied his heart his dearest wish, and seldom crossed her threshold, yet he sent gifts by the children, garden herbs and fruit, late and early roses from his wall, and now and then, with some pretext to save the offensive charitable, flour from his tall mill that whistled on the waste. But Philip did not fathom Annie's mind. Scarce could the woman, when he came upon her, out of full heart and boundless gratitude, light on a broken word to thank him with. But Philip was her children's all in all. From distant corners of the street they ran to greet his hearty welcome heartily. Lords of his house and of his mill were they, worried his passive ear with petty wrongs or pleasures, hung upon him, played with him, called him Father Philip. Philip gained as Enoch lost, for Enoch seemed to them uncertain as a vision or a dream, faint as a figure seen in early dawn down at the far end of an avenue, going we know not where. And so 10 years since Enoch left his hearth and native land, fled forward. And no news of Enoch came. Chanced one evening Annie's children longed to go with others nutting to the wood, and Annie would go with them. Then they begged for Father Philip, as they called him, too. Him, like the working bee in blossom dust, blanched with his mill, they found, and saying to him, "Come with us, Father Philip," he denied. But when the children plucked at him to go, he laughed, and yielding readily to their wish, for was not Annie with them, they went. But after scaling half the weary down, just where the prone edge of the wood began to feather toward the hollow, all her force failed her. "Let me rest," she said. So Philip rested with her well content, while all the younger ones with jubilant cries broke from their elders, and tumultuously down through the whitening hazels made a plunge to the bottom, and dispersed and beat or broke the lithe, reluctant boughs to tear away their tawny clusters, crying to each other and calling here and there about the wood. But Philip, sitting at her side, forgot her presence, and remembered one dark hour here in this wood, when like a wounded life he crept into the shadow. "Alas," he said, "listen, Annie, how merry they are down yonder in the wood." "Tired, Annie?" For she did not speak a word. "Tired?" But her face had fallen upon her hands. And Annie said, "I know not why their voices make me feel so solitary."
Is it loneliness in empty
Then Philip, coming somewhat closer, spoke. "The ship was lost," he said. "The ship was lost. No more of that. Why should you kill yourself and make them orphans quite? Oh, Annie, it is beyond all hope, against all chance, that he who left you 10 long years ago should still be living. Well then, let me speak. I grieve to see you poor and wanting help. I cannot help you as I wish to do unless... They say that women are so quick. Perhaps you know what I would have you know. I wish you for my wife. I fain would prove a father to your children. I do think they love me as a father. I am sure that I love them as if they were mine own. And I believe if you were fast my wife, that after all these sad, uncertain years, we might be still as happy as God grants to any of his creatures. Think upon it. For I am well-to-do, no kin, no care, no burthen, save my care for you and yours. And we have known each other all our lives, and I have loved you longer than you know." Then answered Annie, "You have been as God's good angel in our house. God bless you for it. God reward you for it, Philip, with something happier than myself. Can one live twice? Can you be ever loved as Enoch was? What is it that you ask?" "I am content," he answered, "to be loved a little after Enoch." "Oh," she cried, "dear Philip, wait a while. If Enoch comes..." But Enoch will not come. "Yet wait a year. A year is not so long. Surely I shall be wiser in a year. Oh, wait a little." Philip sadly said, "Annie, as I have waited all my life, I may well wait a little." "Nay," she cried, "I am bound. You have my promise. In a year, will you not bide your year as I bide mine?" And Philip answered, "I will bide my year." Here both were mute. Philip, glancing up, beheld the dead flame of the fallen day pass overhead. Then, fearing night and chill for Annie, rose and sent his voice beneath him through the wood. Up came the children, laden with their spoil. Then all descended to the port, and there at Annie's door he paused and gave his hand. "Annie, when I spoke to you, that was your hour of weakness. I was wrong. I am always bound to you, but you are free." Annie answered, "I am bound." She spoke, and in one moment, as it were, while yet she went about her household ways, even as she dwelt upon his latest words, that he had loved her longer than she knew. That autumn into autumn flashed again, and there he stood once more before her face, claiming her promise. "Is it a year?" she asked. "Yes, if the nuts be ripe again," he said. "Come out and see." But she put him off. So much to look to, such a change. A month, give her a month. She knew she was bound, a month, no more. Then Philip, "Take your own time, Annie. Take your own time." And Annie could have wept for pity of him. And yet she held him on, delayingly, till half another year had slipped away. Her own son was silent, though he often looked his wish. But evermore the daughter pressed upon her to wed the man so dear to all of them, and lift the household out of poverty. And Philip's rosy face, contracting, grew careworn and wan. All these things fell on her sharp as reproach. At last one night it chanced that Annie could not sleep, but earnestly prayed for a sign. My Enoch, is he gone? Then, compassed round by the blind wall of night, brooked not the expectant terror of her heart, started from bed and struck herself a light, then desperately seized the holy book, suddenly set it wide to find a sign, suddenly put her finger on the text. Under a palm tree? That was nothing to her, no meaning there. She closed the book and slept. And lo, her Enoch, sitting on a height under a palm tree. Over him, the sun. He is gone, she thought. He is happy. He is singing Hosanna in the highest. Yonder shining the sun of righteousness. And these be palms were of the happy people strowing cried, Hosanna in the highest. Here she woke, resolved, sent for him, and said wildly to him, there is no reason why we should not wed. Then for God's sake, he answered, both our sakes, so he will wed. Let it be at once. These were wed, and merrily rang the bells. Merrily rang the bells, and they were wed. But never merrily beat Annie's heart. A footstep seemed to fall beside her path. She knew not whence. A whisper on her ear, she knew not what. Nor loved she to be left alone at home, nor ventured out alone. What ailed her then, that ere she entered, often her hand dwelt lingeringly on the latch, fearing to enter? Philip thought he knew. Such doubts and fears were common to her state, being with child. But when her child was born, then her good Philip was her all in all. And where was Enoch? Prosperously sailed the ship Good Fortune, though at setting forth the Biscay, roughly reaching eastward, shook and almost overwhelmed her. Yet unvexed, she slipped across the summer of the world. Then, after a long tumble about the Cape and frequent interchange of foul and fair, she, passing through the summer world again, the breath of heaven came continually and sent her sweetly by the golden isles, till silent in her oriental haven. There Enoch traded for himself and bought quaint monsters for the market of those times, a gilded dragon also for the babes. Less lucky her home voyage. At first, indeed, through many a fair sea circle, day by day, scarce rocking, her full busted figurehead stared o'er the ripple feathering from her bows. Then followed calms, and then winds variable, then baffling a long course of them, and last storm, such as drove her under moonless heavens, till hard upon the cry of breakers came the crash of ruin and the loss of all but Enoch and two others. Half the night, buoyed upon floating tackle and broken spars, these drifted, stranding on an isle at morn, rich but loneliest in a lonely sea. No want was there of human sustenance. Soft fruit, mighty nuts, nourishing roots, nor save for pity was it hard to take the helpless life so wild that it was tame. There in a seaward gazing mountain gorge they built, and thatched with leaves of palm, a hut, half cavern. So the three, set in this Eden of all plenteousness, dwelt with eternal summer, ill content. For one, the youngest hardly more than boy, hurt in that night of sudden ruin and wreck, lay lingering out a 3 years' death in life. They could not leave him. After he was gone, the two remaining found a fallen stem, and Enoch's comrade, careless of himself, fire-hollowing this in Indian fashion, fell sun-stricken, and Enoch lived alone. In those 2 deaths, he read God's warning: wait. The mountain wooded to the peak, the lawns and winding glades high up like ways to heaven, slender coconuts, their crown of plumes, the lightning flash of insect, of bird, the luster of the long convolvuluses that coiled around the stately stems and ran even to the limit of the land, the glows and glories of the broad belt of the world. All these he saw, but what he fain had seen he could not see: the kindly human face, nor ever hear a kindly voice, but heard the myriad shriek of wheeling ocean fowl, the league-long roller thundering on the reef, the moving whisper of huge trees that branched and blossomed in the zenith, or the sweep of some precipitous rivulet to the wave, as down the shore he ranged, or all day long sat often in the seaward gazing gorge, a shipwrecked sailor, waiting for a sail. No sail from day to day. But every day, the sunrise broken into scarlet shafts among the palms and ferns and precipices. The blaze upon the waters to the east, the blaze upon his island overhead, the blaze upon the waters to the west, then the great stars that globed themselves in heavens, the hollower bellowing ocean, and again the scarlet shafts of sunrise. But no sail. There, often as he watched, or seemed to watch, so still, the golden lizard on him paused. A phantom made of many phantoms moved before him, haunting him, or he himself moved haunting people, things and places, known far in a darker isle beyond the line. The babes, Annie, the small house, the climbing street, the mill, the leafy lanes, the peacock yew tree, the horse he drove, the boat he sold, the chill November dawns, the gentle shower, the smell of dying leaves, the low moan of leaden-colored seas.
cam'st a thousand times, a messenger from radiant climes, and smile on thy new world, and be as kind to others as to me. As thou never cam'st in sooth, come now, and let me dream it truth, and part my hair, and kiss my brow, and say, my love, why sufferest thou? Come to me in my dreams, and then my day I shall be well again. For then the night will the hopeless longing of the day.
Once likewise in the ringing of his ears, though faintly, merrily, far and far away, he heard the pealing of his parish bells. Then, though he knew not wherefore, started up, shuddering, and when the beauteous, hateful isle returned upon him, had not his poor heart spoken with that which, being everywhere, lets none who speaks with him seem all alone? Surely the man had died of solitude. Thus over Enoch's early silvering head the sunny and rainy seasons came and went year after year. His hopes to see his own and pace the sacred old familiar fields not yet had perished, when his lonely doom came suddenly to an end. Another ship, she wanted water, blown by baffling winds, like the good fortune from her destined course, stayed by this isle, not knowing where she lay. For since the mate had seen at early dawn across a break on the mist-wreathen isle the silent water slipping from the hills, they sent a crew that, landing, burst away in search of stream or fount and filled the shores with clamour. Downward from his mountain gorge stepped the long-haired, long-bearded solitary, brown, looking hardly human, strangely clad, muttering and mumbling, idiot-like it seemed, with inarticulate rage, and making signs they knew not what. And yet he led the way to where the rivulets of sweet water ran. And ever as he mingled with the crew and heard them talking, his long-bounden tongue was loosened till he made them understand, whom when their casks were filled they took aboard. And here the tale he uttered brokenly, scarce credited at first, but more and more amazed and melted all who listened to it, and clothes they gave him and free passage home. But oft he worked among the rest and shook his isolation from him. None of these came from his county, or could answer him if questioned aught of what he cared to know. And dull the voyage was, with long delays, the vessel scarce seaworthy. But evermore his fancy fled before the lazy wind returning, till beneath a clouded moon he like a lover down through all his blood drew in the dewy, meadowy morning breath of England. And that same morning officers and men levied a kindly tax upon themselves, pitying the lonely man, and gave him it. Then moving up the coast, they landed him even in that harbour whence he sailed before. There Enoch spoke no word to anyone, but homeward, home. What home? Had he a home? His home. He walked. Bright was that afternoon, sunny but chill, till drawn through either chasm, where either haven opened on the deeps, rolled a sea haze, and whelmed the world in grey, cut off the length of highway on before, and left but narrow breadth to left and right. On the nigh naked tree the robin piped, disconsolate. Thicker the drizzle grew, deeper the gloom. He came upon the place. Then down the long street, his eyes upon the stones, he reached the home where Annie lived and loved him, and his babes in those far-off 7 happy years were born. But finding neither light nor murmur there, a bill of sail gleamed through the drizzle, crept still downward, thinking, dead, or dead to me. Down to the pool and narrow wharf he went, seeking a tavern which of old he knew. He thought it must have gone, but he was gone who kept it, and his widow Miriam Lane with daily dwindling profits held the house, a haunt of brawling seamen once, but now stiller with yet a bed for wandering men. There Enoch rested silently many days. But Miriam Lane was good and garrulous, nor let him be, but often breaking in told him, with other annals of the port, not knowing Enoch was so brown, so bowed, so broken, all the story of his house, his baby's death, her growing poverty, how Philip put her little ones to school and kept them in it, his long wooing her slow consent, and marriage, and the birth of Philip's child. And over his countenance no shadow passed. Anyone regarding well had deemed he felt the tale less than the teller, only when she closed, Enoch, poor man, was cast away and lost. He, shaking his grey head pathetically, repeated, muttering, cast away and lost. Lost. But Enoch yearned to see her face again. If I might look on her sweet face and know that she is happy. The thought haunted and harassed him and drove him forth. On the dull November day, he sat gazing down on all below from the hill. By and by, a ruddy square of comfortable light, far blazing from the rear of Philip's house, allured him, as the beacon blaze allures the bird of passage, till he madly strikes against it and beats out his weary life. Philip's dwelling fronted on the street, but behind, one small gate opened on the waste. There flourished a little garden, square and walled, and in it an ancient evergreen, a yew tree, all around a walk of shingle. Enoch stole up by the wall behind the yew, and thence that which he better might have shunned, if griefs like his have worse or better, Enoch saw. for cups and silver on the burnished board sparkled and shone. So genial was the hearth, and on the right hand of the hearth he saw Philip, the slighted suitor of old times, stout, rosy, with his babe across his knees. And over her second father stooped a girl, a later but a lofter Annie Lee, fair-haired and tall, and from her lifted hand dangled a length of ribbon and a ring to tempt the babe, who reared his arms, caught at it, and ever missed it. And they laughed. And on the left hand of the hearth he saw the mother glancing often toward her babe, but turning now and then to speak with him, her son, who stood beside her tall and strong, and saying that which pleased him, for he smiled. Now, when the dead man came to life, beheld his wife no more, and the babe hers, yet not his, upon the father's knee, and all the warmth, the peace, the happiness, and his own children, tall and beautiful, and him, that other, reigning in his place, lord of his rights and of his children's love. Then he, though Miriam Lane had told him all, staggered and shook, and feared to send abroad a shrill and terrible cry, which like the blasts of doom would shatter all the happiness of the hearth. He therefore, turning softly like a leaf, lest the harsh shingle should grate underfoot, feeling all along the garden wall, lest he should swoon and tumble and be found, crept to the gate, opened it, closed, and came out upon the waste. And there he would have knelt, but that his knees were feeble, so that falling prone he dug his fingers into the wet earth and prayed. Too hard to bear. Why did they take me thence? God Almighty, blessed Savior, Thou that didst uphold me on my lonely isle, uphold me, Father, in my loneliness a little longer. Aid me. Give me strength not to tell her, never to let her know. Help me not to break in upon her peace. My children too, must I not speak to them? They know me not. I should betray myself. Never. No father's kiss for me. A girl so like her mother, and the boy, my son. There speech and thought and nature failed a little, and he lay tranced. But when he rose and paced back toward his solitary home again, all down the long and narrow street he went, beating it in upon his weary brain, as though it were the burthen of a song, not to tell her, never to let her know, not to tell her, never to let her know. Never.
Es ist mir auch gar nichts daran gelegen, ob sie mich für gestorben hält. Ich kann auch gar nichts sagen dagegen, denn wirklich bin ich gestorben der Welt. Ich bin gestorben, dem Weltgetümmel und ruh in einem Ich lebe allein in meinem Himmel, in meinem
He was not all unhappy. His resolve upbore him, and firm faith, like fountains of sweet water in the sea, kept him a living soul. "This miller's wife," he said to Miriam, "that you told me of, has she no fear that her first husband lives?" "Aye, aye, poor soul," said Miriam. "Feary now. If you could tell her you had seen him dead, why, that would be her comfort." And he thought, "After the Lord has called me, she shall know. I wait his time." And Enoch set himself, scorning an alms, to work whereby to live. Almost to all things could he turn his hand. Cooper he was and carpenter, and wrought to make the boatmen fishing nets, or helped at lading and unlading the tall barks that brought the commerce of those days. Thus earned a scanty living for himself. Yet since he did but labour for himself, work without hope, there was not life in it whereby the man could live. And as the year rolled itself round again to meet the day when Enoch had returned, a languor came upon him, gentle sickness, gradually weakening the man till he could do no more, but kept the house, his chair, and last his bed. He called aloud for Miriam Lane and said, "Woman, I have a secret. Only swear before I tell you, swear upon the book not to reveal it till you see me dead." "Dead!" clamoured the good woman. "Hear him talk. I warrant, man, that we shall bring you round." "Swear," said Enoch sternly, "on the book." And on the book, half frighted, Miriam swore. Then Enoch, "Did you know Enoch Arden of this town?" "Know him," she said. "I knew him far away. I mind him coming down the street, held his head high and cared for no man, he." Slowly and sadly Enoch answered her, "His head is low, and no man cares for him. I think I have not 3 days more to live. I am the man." "You Arden, you? Nay, sure he was a foot higher than you be." Enoch said again, "My God has bowed me down to what I am. My grief and solitude have broken me. Nevertheless, know that I am he who married her who married Philip Ray. Sit, listen." Then he told her of his voyage, his wreck, his lonely life, his coming back, his gazing in on Annie, his resolve, and how he kept it. As the woman heard, fast flowed the current of her easy tears, while in her heart she yearned incessantly to rush abroad all round the little haven, proclaiming Enoch Arden and his woes. But awed and promise-bound she forbore, saying, "See your bairns before you go." Let me fetch 'em, Arden." And rose, eager to bring them down. For Enoch hung a moment on her words, but then replied, "Woman, disturb me not at the last, but let me hold my purpose till I die. Sit down again. Mark me and understand while I have power to speak. I charge you now, when you shall see her, tell her that I died blessing her, praying for her, loving her. Save for the bar between us, loving her as when she laid her hand and head beside mine own. And tell my daughter Annie, whom I saw so like her mother, that my latest breath was spent in blessing her and praying for her. And tell my son that I died blessing him, and say to Philip that I blessed him too. He never meant us anything but good. But if my children care to see me dead, who hardly knew me living, let them come. I am their father. But she must not come, for my dead face would vex her. And now there is but one of all my blood who will embrace me in the world to be. This hair is his. She cut it off and gave it. And I have borne it with me all these years and thought to bear it with me to my grave. But now my mind is changed, for I shall see him, my babe in bliss. Wherefore, when I am gone, give her this, for it may comfort her. It will moreover be a token to her that I am he. He ceased, and Miriam Lane made such a voluble answer, promising all, that once again he rolled his eyes upon her, repeating all he wished, and once again she promised. Then the third night after this, while Enoch slumbered motionless and pale, and Miriam watched and dozed at intervals, there came so loud a calling of the sea that all the houses in the haven rang. He woke, he rose, he spread his arms abroad, crying with a loud voice, "A sail! A sail! I am saved!" And so fell back and spoke no more. So passed the strong, heroic soul away, and when they buried him, the little port had seldom seen a costlier funeral.
Shine